if you gaze for long into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you.
Back in 2014-15, I was in high school and living with my parents. My parents were heavy on Christianity growing up, so I was raised going to church 2 times a week. My mum is extremely spiritual as well. Anyways, for years my mum kept telling everyone that there was a lot of spiritual warfare that was going on in our house. Everyone in my family thought she was just crazy, but I strongly believe it was true. My sisters started going down the wrong path. My dad was apparently cheating on my mum for years, etc. My parents started noticing some weird type of feces in our basement window wells. So one night my mum asked me to help her find out what it was by going into the basement with the lights off and only using a flashlight. We went down there and were quietly waiting to see if we could figure out what it was, when all of a sudden we heard a whisper that was so loud it almost felt like it was coming from a surround sound speaker. It was almost as if somebody came right up into both of our ears and whispered. It immediately sent chills down my whole body as well as my mum's. We both froze for a second, and my mum said, "What was that? Was that you?" And I said, "No, what was that?" We both bolted up the stairs screaming. We refused to go back down that night, and my dad tried to say we were just crazy and hearing things. I've never felt so uncomfortable and violated in my entire life. Something definitely whispered into our ears, but we couldn't figure out what it had said. Still to this day, thinking about it freaks me out. Since then, my parents divorced and sold the house. Growing up, I had experienced a few strange things in that house, as did my sisters as well. Sometimes, we would hear what almost sounded like a phone vibrating in the basement, but we couldn't ever figure out where it was coming from. It happened multiple times in a span of 5 years. I truly believe there was a demonic entity messing with my family. What are your thoughts or input on what this could have possibly been? Let me set the scene. I used to own a house near the mountains in the northern side of Colorado. This was a period of time where I had just gotten fired from my job because of COVID-related reasons and was home alone. I lived with my roommate at the time, but he went out to some club that evening, leaving me alone with my dog. I hate to even think of this, and this is the first time I've ever told anyone besides my neighbors. It was around 8 p.m. on a Friday, and I was watching Friends on the TV. While watching, I heard what sounded like boxes shuffling around in the basement. My dog immediately noticed this and brought his head up. Our basement wasn't finished and we had a window down there, which wasn't in good shape, so I just had brushed it off, thinking that the wind was making noises. After a while, the noise never stopped. I decided to grab my light and head down there with my dog. So I grabbed my light from the kitchen and opened the door to the basement. I started walking down the stairs, calling for my dog. The only odd thing was that my dog decided to not come down and was making that high-pitched whining noise dogs make when they are happy or anxious. He refused to go down in the basement and just stood at the top of the stairs. To give you more perspective on how my basement was laid out, was all of my extra stuff from my childhood, like clothes and such, was in the back right corner. So when you walk down the stairs, on the very right That is where that stuff is. And all of my roommate's stuff is right next to mine on the left. And there was a bench with all of the previous owner's stuff that they left there. So while going down there, the sound was still very clear and was getting louder and louder the further I got in there. I saw the window open and making noises and decided to go close it. As soon as I closed it, it felt like a hand grabbed my leg. But it wasn't a normal hand. It was super hot. My legs were swooped back and I fell down. All I can remember from that point on was my dog barking extremely loud. I then woke up and found myself in the closet of my roommate's bedroom. I walked downstairs and looked at the time, and it was 3 a.m, and my roommate wasn't back yet. I literally looked at the clock, grabbed my phone, dog, and ran outside the front door. I went over to the neighbor's house, about a mile away. I ran there, barefoot. I didn't have a car at the time, by the way. When I got to the neighbors, that I barely knew, by the way, I rang the doorbell extremely fast, and around a minute later, a man opened the door and asked why I was ringing his door this late at night, and I could tell he was quite frustrated with me. I told him everything, and he said that the previous owners moved out because the husband of the house ended up hanging himself in the basement. We talked for a bit while I let my dog run around in the back. I called my roommate to not go home and come over to the neighbor's house. Around an hour later, he showed up and we all just sat there and talked about what had happened. Around 10 a.m, I headed back to my house with my roommate to find the sofa flipped, all the doors open, and the cabinets in the kitchen all open with dishes on the floor, broken. I decided to go live with my sister and sell the house around 2 months later. To this day, I'm not sure what that was and haven't had any other experiences. By the way, something that I didn't tell was that I had just broken up with my girlfriend. I've heard that ghosts thrive off bad energy or whatever. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think it was or how to explain it. This story is from a close friend. Kind of a short story. About 7 years ago, one of my best friends, James, was living with his girlfriend, Sarah, in an older house. It was kind of a beat-up old house in the back of a double lot. 2 houses on the same plot of land. The house belonged to Sarah's mother, and she let them live there because no one would rent it and they needed a place to live. They got most of their things in, but not unpacked yet. As James brought in a laundry basket, Sarah's mum made mention that there was a washer and dryer in the basement that worked. The only stipulation was not to do laundry after dark. James agreed, but thought it to be an odd request. Fast forward about a month. James had done a bit of laundry during the afternoon, but forgot to switch it over to the dryer. It's about 10 p.m. now, and he decides it'll only take a second to switch it over, so he'll do it quick despite the warning. The stairs to the basement go down about 7 steps. Then there's a landing, a left turn, and 3 more. James gets to that landing and makes his turn and watches a little boy run across the basement from behind the furnace to behind the washer. The little boy wasn't completely solid, nor did he make a sound as he was running. James noped the hell out of there and never went back into the basement at night. This was the first ghost experience he had at that house, but it definitely was not the last. So, I live in a basement in my parent-in-law's house, and my wife never goes down to my room in the basement. I'm almost always in there alone. Since I've lived in there, a few things have been happening that I dismissed as ventilation or something or another, such as my door slowly creeping open. Frankly, I wouldn't even have noticed it opening if it weren't for the green indicator light of something I have plugged into the wall outside my room. At night, if I have to leave my room, I exit and make an immediate left and dip into the bathroom for restroom use. I can almost always sense an entity in the living/bar area of the basement. This feeling is compounded when I exit the bathroom and my reflection appears on the sliding doors across from the bathroom. Sometimes, I do not have a face in my reflection. I quickly re-enter my bathroom and shut and lock the door. Some nights, there is a knocking from within my mattress that wakes me up, usually between 3 a.m. and 3:15. I have no way of dealing with this, other than risking it and fleeing upstairs to my son's room. My son, 3, has autism and frequently says, "That's scary," over and over in the basement, looking towards the bathroom and living areas. The light switches that I have access to when leaving the room frequently cease to function right when I need them, or will flicker out almost violently as I'm on the staircase halfway up and out of the basement. I can hear rustling in the middle of the night sometimes as well, and I usually convince myself that it's a mouse. Lately, this has escalated to the sound of footsteps in the ceiling in the middle of the night. Most recently, when I heard these footsteps, there was no one home but me, and I searched the house while wielding a knife for an intruder to find no one home. I think this entity is aware that I know it exists, and I interacted with it via the mirror once, and it contorted my face. Any idea what it is or if I should be concerned? Growing up, my family has been subject to the paranormal in many ways. Visual, audio, smell and touch. My father was a non-believer till the day he died. Always made a logical reason to the bump or bang. Our basement was a nice, cool place to be, especially in the summer months, as it retained its cooler temperature. For as long as we can remember, a spirit remained down there and was receptive to company of the living. We used to play Monopoly at the dining room table, and we would hear the squeaky stairs, and then we would look at the door as the knob jiggled. Sometimes the door opened and sometimes it just jiggled, as if some days it had the energy and others not. When my mother would do laundry, she only went to the basement in the company of one of our 2 black Labradors, either Duke or Duchess. She hated going down there because she was the very religious one and just hated the feeling of someone behind her. I would go down there and sleep often, as my dad was too cheap to install the AC units, and it was much cooler. I never really felt scared, but I did know I was not alone. Often I would hear the light switch click on and off. I remember my bike was flipped upside down and had the little beads on the spokes that would tinker-tanker as the kid spun a tire slowly. One time, he must have gotten spooked because I got spooked. He spun the tire when I was down there watching TV. I got up and started to leave the basement, thinking, not today, and I felt him behind me as if escorting me out. I started to run and felt the adrenaline as if my friend was about to take me in a game of tag. My dad was an electrician and installed the metal switches with lights green and red, indicating current or no current flow. The switches controlled everything from each individual light to the TV. Imagine a circuit breaker, and that's how the electricity was controlled. You could hear these metallic clicks from 100 feet away. After we did some digging, we learned through the library that a kid, Stephen, hung himself as a teenager due to severe depression. This was not too often, but not uncommon for patients to be untreated back in the day. It was sometime in 52 or 53 that this happened, if I remember correctly. My hair just stood up as I recall this next bit. In the laundry room directly behind the washer and dryer was our furnace. Above and just off to the side remained the pulley, the young man attached to the joist. This is why my mother hated doing laundry. As soon as the dogs acted funny or raised their hairs on their backbone, she was out of there like a bat out of hell. The kid never did anything malicious, but he sure got satisfaction knowing that he got to you. As long as you could close your eyes, let the chills pass through you, as you kinda raised your head, as if you were holding it in. It passed, and then you could continue to do what you were doing. I think he liked my mum the most, because she never stood her ground. And besides the one time I ran, I usually did. So my friend was living in this apartment building. His bathroom was in the basement, and opposite the bathroom there was a room that always seemed locked. One day, I was using his bathroom, and when I was done, I noticed that the room across the hall has its door slightly opened, which I thought was odd. I told my friend that the door was open, and he rushed down to shut it and lock it, and we didn't speak more of this at the time. About a week later, I was again using his bathroom. On the way in, I double-checked the door across the room. It was shut. So I just did what you usually do in bathrooms. And when I got out, I saw the door was open again. This time my friend came down and we both stared at the door. I asked him if we could look inside. He was nervous, but said, "It's creepy in there. It's where my mum's doll collection is." Sure enough, she had a wall-to-wall porcelain doll collection. Just thinking of it today, many years later, it creeps me out. I kinda knew that entering that room was possibly the stupidest idea I ever had. And oh boy, I was right. We locked the door back up and went back upstairs to play some PS3. Nothing really happened that night. A few weeks later, we had a late night at his place, and I was once again using the bathroom. I was standing with my back to the door, and I heard the door to the doll room open up slowly, and I just ignored it. Suddenly, I hear dog nails scratch up against my door. Us dog people know this sound from anywhere. This spooked me a lot, even to this day. I gathered everything holy in me and swung the door open, only to find nothing. My friend left the key in the door, so I locked it back up and told my friend. My friend told me that the house had some weird history. There was a reason that they had no animals in the house, and the few animals they ever had didn't survive long. I can't tell the reason, but it's obscure and very disturbed. This is where it gets a little too much, and to this day still haunts me every now and again. We were playing some PS3 again, and my bladder is not made for large quantities of Coca-Cola. So, bathroom I go. I didn't even notice the doll door, but I just stormed into the bathroom and did my thing. Suddenly, I hear dog nails walking on the concrete floor outside the door. So I wash my hands and swing open the door, and whatever that thing was, I'll never forget. It was a medium-sized dog with very messy fur and, you know, when you take a picture of a dog, like reflective eyes. That was how the eyes looked. We stared at each other for what felt like forever. But it was only about 1 second, and it faded out of existence. I was done being alone in this basement. My friend didn't really believe, to be honest. I didn't really believe me either, but I got him convinced to try to catch this thing on video. But our shitty phone cameras were about 10 pixels of darkness, and that wouldn't work. So I did some research and found one of those ghost investigator teams with cameras and flashy things, and I told them about it. They were very hyped to spend a few hours in the basement/doll room. They got all their stuff set up and we sat 2 floors up playing some more PS3. After a little while, we heard a lot of shouting and his front door slammed shut. So we went down there to see what the heck happened. All their things, cameras, and all their ghost-busting equipment was still there. So we went outside and spoke with them. They said that they would come back for their stuff in the morning, and then we could talk. They were shook to their inner cores. I went home and my friend went to bed. I was down there at 9 a.m. the next morning, but by then they already got their stuff packed up and left. My friend told me that they caught the door opening and something launched at them and haunted them out of the basement. I asked if they had any evidence or at least something to show. And no, all their footage except the door opening got corrupted. I was so sad, but I'll never forget their faces. By this stage, his parents divorced, and his mum moved out and took her doll collection with her. But the thing in the basement stayed there. It was more rare that something went bump in the night, but to this day, I still walk by his old house, and every 8 to 10 months, the house gets new owners or is vacant. I wonder why. Thanks for reading, and have a great day. I was at a party with my high school crew, and we had a few bottles and a few grams on us. We heard that some football team from Des Moines was coming through, and we weren't sure if they'd be cool or not since athletes in our town were usually douchebags. If they turned out to be douches, we wouldn't want to share any of our bud with them. So we decided to hide it until we got to know them, so they wouldn't come up to us and ask to join the smoke session. To avoid this, I brought the bag downstairs to the basement because I assumed nobody would be going down there. There wasn't any space to party, just a bunch of haphazardly stored boxes and totes. I found a basket on a table and put the baggie in it, then placed a blanket on top. Nobody would find it if they didn't know what they were looking for, so I called it good and rejoined the party. Later on, we'd started drinking a little, and the players showed up, and turned out to be pretty cool. I'd forgotten about the weed until I saw one of them, a big-ass, broad-shouldered dude in his team jersey, being led down the stairs by a slender girl with long hair. I saw her lead him down the stairs and figured I knew what they were up to, wink wink. But I didn't want them stumbling upon the bag and claiming finders keepers, so I followed them down the stairs. I knew I'd look like a weirdo following them like that, since no one else was down there, but I didn't want them taking our shit, so I followed about 2 to 3 steps behind them. I saw the girl enter the basement, and then out of my view, and then the guy, and then I stepped in right behind them. When I got down there, mind you, this was barely a second or two after they left my sight, all I saw was the football player, looking around frantically, looking confused as hell. I said, "What's up, dude?" trying to figure out how I'd explain my reasons for following them down into the basement. But he just turned to me and said,
Where'd she go?
I said, you mean that girl? What you mean? I saw her come down with you. He said something along the lines of,
Yeah, man. She just came up to me out of nowhere and whispered, "Follow me." But now she's gone, bro. She just disappeared.
I figured she was hiding in the closet or something, so I looked around. He was too shook to go into the closet, and she was nowhere to be found. There's no door down there, and when we ran upstairs to tell the host, she just laughed and said, "Yeah, this house is haunted as hell," and walked away, completely nonchalant about the whole thing. Never got a better explanation out of her. She wasn't someone I knew very well, just a friend of friends of friends. All I knew is that there was no door and no time for this girl to have come up with any sufficiently clever way to disappear from view. We carried on with the party, and nothing else seemed to be out of place that night. Still, I can't help but wonder, what would have happened to that guy if I hadn't followed him into the basement? Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.